goes on. I hit number 8 on this one novel. I was dead set on hitting number 5. I thought I'd hit number 5, I hit number 8, and I took no joy from it. And I knew that day something is very wrong. Something's upside down. And I was, but my whole life I had been groaning. Really, I'd been groaning for my father. And really, my father had let me go into this experience where I lost my earthly father so that I would go on this hunt. You see what a beautiful gift that was. And I remember the day of my awakening very clearly today. I can't tell you why. I can just say that it was years and years of spiritual practice. This is how it usually happens. And I was sitting, just suddenly the wind blows where it wills, and the Father draws, and suddenly I was sitting there, staring at the mirror in my bathroom. And I suddenly saw things differently. And here's what I saw. It was like, that's not me. That person in the mirror isn't me. Not kind of, sort of, but isn't me. And I remember when I went like this, I touched my face and I'm like, that's not me. And it was beautiful. It was like, that's not me. That's Ted Dekker. That's just my body, my form, my flesh and bone, let's call it a costume. My costume. That's not me, though. I am a spiritual being only taking a ride in that vehicle. Follow me. Follow me. Husband. Father. Writer. No. These are just the roles I'm playing. That's Ted Dekker. But I'm not that. I am that. I'm playing those roles. But it's not the truest me. Now follow me, because this is where it gets challenging for some of you, and I want you to just keep going with me. You'll see in a few minutes, if you allow yourself. To illustrate this, let me tell you about a boy that I met a few nights ago. Actually, this happened 2 nights in a row. 2 different boys, both in wheelchairs, both deformed. 14, 15 years old, perhaps. I think one was 12. They wheeled him up that first night. I remember that. So I think maybe 4 or 5 nights ago. And he was deformed, you see. He couldn't speak. He was trying to. But I saw his eyes. And in his eyes I saw this bright light. And I knew I was looking at my brother. And I'm telling you something. That body was just his costume. It wasn't him. He had no disadvantage over me. I have a different costume. But that was not him. The second night, another boy. The very next night, it was my father telling me, you see, remember. Another boy. Now, what if he can't add 1 + 1 to equal 2? Is he then at a disadvantage over you? No, because his mind is not him either. These are just electrochemical things. Now, I'm not going to disparage the costume. The truth is, you can really learn to love your costume only by following the path I'm about to suggest. So, stay with me. Those boys have no disadvantage in their father's eyes. They are not substandard or less than in any way, because that is just their costume. Now, let me take another tack. How many of you guys have seen the movie The Illusionist? How many of you guys like illusions? An illusion is like where someone goes and suddenly there's a bird in his hand, or a coin, or they reach behind the ear. It's thousands of hours of practice. It's a skill. And they use sleight of hand. It's not magic. Sleight of hand, dexterity, and distraction. They distract you over here, right? While something else is happening over here. In your eyes, you're perceiving what's happening right over here. You're watching them as closely as you can, but you're distracted while something else is happening. And when the reveal comes, you say, that's impossible. That is impossible. I was watching. Yeah? Distraction. In our relationships, and in things like success, and money, and cars, and ministries. No problem with any of those. beautiful gifts, but they master us. And we are distracted by them. And we forget completely who we are. And so we suffer and suffer. And we suffer some more. Your perception of the world, hear me clearly, has vast influence on how you are in the world, on how you experience your life, your perception. Case in point, Jane and Mary. This is a clinical study. Jane and Mary is one woman who suffers from dissociative identity disorder. She perceives herself as two people, Jane and Mary. She perceives herself as Jane. There is an imbalance in her mind. And many people have this condition. And regardless of what your beliefs are in regards to this, follow me. When she believes she's Jane. She knows that Jane talks a certain way, has certain allergies, say to poison ivy, has certain preferences in food. When she's Mary, she talks a different way, has different preferences, has no allergy to poison ivy. Different person altogether. In clinical studies, within the laboratory, within the clinic, true enough, when she is in the persona of Jane, they rub poison ivy on her arm, and she flares up. Of course, she knows she has an allergy to poison ivy. But 3 hours later, or a day later, when she is Mary, they rub poison ivy on her. No reaction at all. Even your body responds to your perception of who you think you are. You see how important it is to know who you are. Well, here's the biggest deception that we in the church have, even we in the church. And that is we still cling to this, this idea that we are physical beings having spiritual experiences. A spiritual experience. Kind of under the humdrum of life, coming up once and now and again, maybe in church, maybe during our prayers. But we're primarily physical beings reaching for God, having spiritual experiences to help our physical existence. No, this is wrong. We are actually spiritual beings, only having a temporary physical experience. Did you hear that? Write that one down in your head. You are a spiritual being, only having a temporary physical experience. And if you identify yourself that way, your whole perspective will begin to shift. Then you will ask yourself this question once again. Well then, who am I? What does a spiritual being look like? What does my Father look like? And you see what I'm saying? It brings us back to that whole question in the very beginning. Who am I? Okay. When we understand who we are, when we see who we are, then we can be who we are. Jesus told us who we are in this beautiful parable I'm about to tell you, the story. I'm going to tell it the same way he did, but using different terms. I'm not going to change any of the content. And if you've heard this story before, go with me. Okay? It's a story of two sons. Now, there's this thing about father. There's this thing about father. It's a father and two sons. And there's this thing about father that Jesus knew that we would always struggle with. He knew that we would always look to our earthly father as our primary identity. We are the son of our Father. And he knew that our roles, our relationships in life would always keep us from seeing who we truly were. Not just our bodies, but even our relationships. So, he taught this. How many of you know this? How many know he said this? He said, "Call no man on earth Father, for your Father is in heaven. Call no man on earth Father, for your Father is in heaven." How many knew? Raise your hands. Who knew he taught that? Okay, about maybe 20% of you. Some churches it's only 10%. He knew that we would identify with Father. What does that mean to you as a father? Your son is not to call you Father. You're to teach him who his Father really is. And this is Jesus' teaching, not mine. Or how about this teaching? Jesus said this, and again, this is crazy, I know. And I know Jesus, he likes to exaggerate to get our attention a little bit. Or he likes to at least use hyperbole. He said this, "Unless you hate your father, your mother, your spouse, your children," he included, You cannot follow me. Jesus said this? How many of you knew that was in the Bible? Okay, about the same number. So that about 20% of you are familiar with this teaching. It was one of Jesus' primary, it really was a big emphasis of his. He taught things like cut off, if your hand is keeping